Hey guys, this is Honest Tiago, and I'm making a video for my Galio support guide on lolking. And my goal for this video is basically to outline a lot of Galio's strengths and weaknesses so people can understand him a bit better, because I feel like there's a lot of misunderstandings about Galio and people misinterpret him, as well as the fact that people really undervalue his impact in the game. So hopefully by watching this, you make it to the end. I really hope you do, because I think you're going to learn a lot about Galio, and maybe even some things not about Galio that you might not have known. So, first about me, I'm not going to talk too long about it, because really I'm not really that spectacular. But I've been playing since Season 2, and I've just kind of always played Galio. And I know it's weird, but when I first started playing, I was really bad. I was really, really bad. And basically, Galio was the first champion I didn't feed on, so I just played the hell out of him. I never really realized he was unpopular. I never really felt like there was something wrong with this kit. I was looking at it and everything seemed pretty reasonable, and I just kind of fell in love with the champion, his playstyle, his lore, just about everything about him. It's really one of my favorite characters in the game. Never mind, he is my favorite character. And, I've been playing him a lot lately. I started playing ranked, and basically I decided, you know what, I'm gonna see how far I can get Galio support in ranked. As it turns out, Galio support's really strong, and a lot of people don't give him credit for it. Right now, as it stands, I'm in Platinum, purely off of Galio support. I've probably played across all my accounts, roughly 2,000 games on him, if I was to guess. Not exclusively in support for those games. Top, mid, sometimes jungle, and support Galio. And that's part of the great thing about Galio is he's very versatile. He can build pretty much anything and stay relevant besides AD items and, you know, attack speed items, stuff like that. He can build tank and be a really good CC disruptor kind of deal. He can build, you know, AP and be really bursty. He's a really versatile champion, and especially in support role, I think he's very, very strong. But there's so few people playing him, nobody really knows. But enough about that, let's get into Galio. Alright, so pros and cons. Every champion has their pros and cons. That's just a given. But Galio's are... I wouldn't say his cons outweigh his pros, but he definitely has some things you need to understand before playing him at the best of his abilities. Okay, and for one, his pros. He's got a really strong harassing lane. That's mostly because of his Q. And what his Q is, it's AoE slow with very high base damage. I gotta double check, but it's probably one of the higher ones in the game. I don't think many champions have such a good base damage. And to compensate for that, his scaling is pretty poor. Additionally, he has a very strong W ability. And his W is called Full Warp, and it massively increases armor, MR, and it heals them whenever it takes damage, or whoever is shielded takes damage. As I already talked about, he's got a really versatile build. He can build so much that you can't really predict what he's going to do. Maybe he'd be AP support Galio, maybe he'll be tank support Galio. Like, you're not sure until he's actually started going through his items. Another great thing about Galio, not a lot of champions have this, it's an AoE ranged slow. So, Galio's Q is a fairly slow moving projectile, but it can hit a pretty big area, as in it slows and deals pretty good base damage, especially in early game. He's a very good early game bully, if you manage your mana right. And this is part of his con too, that I'll talk about in a moment. But, you have to land the Qs. If you can't land the Qs and you can't land the ultimate, don't play Galio, because, like, sorry if that's blunt, but that's just the facts. You're not going to be able to get the most out of this champion if you can't do that. And, you know, play some boss games. It takes a little bit of practice, but it's not too hard, I promise you. And one of Galio's biggest strengths and one of the most iconic things about him is definitely his ultimate. He called the Idol of Durand. So he basically plops down on the ground and taunts everybody in a big circle. And the more they hit him, the more damage he deals to them when he explodes. And one final thing, he doesn't need AP to be good. If he wants to deal damage, yeah, he needs AP. But if he wants to be there as a tank, as a disruptor, he doesn't need any AP for that. He's got that. You know, he's got a solid slow. He's got a really good taunt, and he's got a pretty disappointing E, but can't have everything. Alright, and his cons are this one. He's also fairly infamous for. He goes out of mana very fast if you don't manage it properly. And honestly, I don't have a problem with it because I played it long enough, but these new players, they don't know what to max, they don't know what to use and when. And I see a lot of people will use their E, which is the second point. Galio's E, Righteous Gust, doesn't really do a whole lot. It deals less base damage than Q, it scales worse than Q, and at level 1, which is what it's going to be at most of the game, because there's almost no reason to max it, it gives you less move speed than basic boots, which is really sad for an ability that costs so much mana. It has, at level 1, at all ranks actually, it costs more mana than Q, which is probably one of the strongest abilities, single non-ultimates in the game. And maybe that's a trade-off. Another con of Galio that all Galio mains know is on-hit stuns are the bane of your existence. They are so annoying. And the reason for this is, obviously, let's say you're in a team fight, you're mid-game, you have your whole team together, the enemy Renekton comes, pops W, and you ult. And you're the first person he hits, boom. 135 seconds, cooldown, and you've accomplished nothing because Renekton hit W at the wrong time. And that's one of the most annoying things about Galio. If you are playing Galio and you're against a very CC heavy team, after your core items, get a Banshee's Veil. Like, it will save your ass so many times. It's really good to have because, you know, you can afford that on hit because it's just going to be popped by the Banshee's Veil instead of taking you out of your ultimate. And another thing is your damage falls off. You're really good mid and early game. That's where your damage. That's where you shine. That's where your damage is. That's where you that's just Galio's best place. Not to say he's not good late game, which he is, but his damage is not going to be as incredible. But that's the same for any support, really. There are some exceptions, but most supports aren't their damage is not gonna be amazing late game. So I don't really think it's too much of a con for Galio as a support. And another thing, and this turns off a lot of people, Galio doesn't have much playmaking ability. Outside of his ultimate, really, like, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna flash Q? Like, really the only play you're gonna make is you're gonna hit a Q. You know, it's boring, but it's consistent. And that's what I like about Galio, like, he's mechanically challenging enough to keep me entertained, but not so much so that I get overwhelmed. And that's what I really like about him. And his con, the final con here, is his strength lies on you hitting your skill shots. If you're not going to hit your skill shot, you're going to have a hard time. It's going to be really difficult to get that lane presence, to get that lane dominance. And if you miss a lot of skill shots, you're going to run out of mana because you can keep spamming them. And that's really, really bad because that leaves you vulnerable to jungle ganks. It leaves you vulnerable to engages. It's just a whole lot of bad. You gotta watch your mana as Galio. Try to have at least 80 at all time, so when the enemy if the enemy jungler comes, you can slow them and get out of there. Alright, next is my runes. And I've tried a lot, like I have tried so many combinations of runes. This is my standard rune setup for almost all matchups. You can tailor them to specific matchups, but this is really all you need. You got 9 magic pen marks, you got 9 armor seals, 9 MR glyphs, and 3 AP points. For me, this is the optimal setup at the moment. One thing I do now and then is I replace my MR for scaling if I'm in a really passive lane. Because if you're against a Sona, if you're against a Soraka, if you're against a Nami, you're probably not going to be able to poke them out of lane. They're just going to heal it all up, so you don't need the bonus damage you get from the MR. So there's really no downside to getting scaling MRs because you're gonna get more relevant. Like it's gonna take longer for you to fall off in that way. Next is my Masteries. So this is pretty standard among tanky supports. It's 0921, and this is specifically for getting as many Qs in lane as you can, while staying BP enough to survive and engage. So the 9 points in defense, it reduces the auto attack you get. So like, let's say you try to hit the 80 carry. Lately, in this current meta, Caitlyn's very popular, so if you go for a Q, she's gonna hit you back no matter what. So this minimizes the repercussions of getting hit by her, as well as the extra health from the Juggernaut, and you also get the % bonus MR and armor, which will help you later game get beefier. For the utility, I've specifically chosen ones that will will minimize your cooldowns while increasing the amount of mana regen you get. So this will let you get the most out of your Qs, it'll let you spam the most, and it'll also let make sure your flash is going to be up, because flash on Galio is one of the most important things you can have. It's very difficult to set up an ultimate without flash and have a big impact. Alright, now we're going to start talking about Galio's abilities. And I've got all the information on the page, but really I'm going to talk about the importance of them and how to use them. Because a lot of people use this wrong. A lot of people misunderstand Galio, so I'm going to talk about that. So Galio's passive is really strong. Galio converts 50% of his current magic resist into ability power, which is pretty great. He starts the game with 32 magic resist, which gives him sorry, I'm bad at math. Roughly 15 or 16 AP to start with. And Galio's Q has a 60% AP ratio. So you start the game and you're doing a pretty good amount of damage. You're doing nearly 100 damage with 1 Q at level 1. Keep in mind, this is a game where some champions start the game with 400 health. Nami, Sona, for example. So now we're going to talk about Q. This is Galio's bread and butter. This is very important if you want to be a good Galio. So Galio fires a concussive blast from his eyes to a target area, dealing magic damage and slowing enemies. So as you can see, right here, range is 940 units. To put that into context, a turret's range is 775. And this has personally helped me get a lot of cheesy kills. People will be behind their turret thinking they're safe within their turret's range, but you can hit them outside of their turret's range. You can hit them where they think they're safe, which is really funny when you get a cheese kill because they think there's no way he's going to hit me from there. Galio has a very long range Q when you aim it properly. And keep in mind, Galio has a stigma around him. He burns mana really bad. To an extent that's true, but this is really only if people use him improperly. And I'll get to that in a bit, but right now, you see Galio's mana costs, they go up by 5 every single level. And if you see my guide, I'll actually quickly switch to it. If you see my guide, you see I actually opt to go for a second point in Q before I go for E. And here's my reasoning behind that. For Q, at the cost of 5 extra mana, it goes from 60 to 65. I go from 80 damage to 135, which is unreal. Let's see. 90, 100, 110, 20, 30. Yeah, So that's 55 extra damage for 5 at the cost of 5 mana. That's insane, as well as an extra 4% on top of your current slow. That's a really, really big boost in power. If you hit somebody with a Q, you level up and you get the next level of Q. Hit them again, you'll see the big difference, and it's an enormous difference at level 4. And that's why some people get thrown off when they see my guy and they see, instead of putting a point into E, I go for Q. Because it's an immense difference. One thing you'll notice about Galio is cooldowns do not go down, with exception to his ultimate. His cooldowns stay the same at all ranks, unless you're building cooldown reduction. So at rank 5, Galio's Q does 40% slow in an AoE, which is really great crowd control throughout the entire game. It's pretty good, especially when you hit multiple people with it. It can really save your ass. Alright, next is probably one of the strongest abilities in the game, and it's deceptively strong too. Which is his Bulwark, his W. Galio shields an allied champion or himself for 4 seconds, so this is quite a while, increasing their armor and magic resist. Each time that unit takes damage, Galio is healed. The heal is 20% weaker each consecutive hit. So what this means is, damage over times can effectively heal Galio. That's why he is really good in a lot of top lane matchups, especially against Darius, against Singed, because when he gets a damage over time from it, he gets healed from it. Like, Darius will Q me, I'll put out my W, and I'll get healed back to full health. Meanwhile, he'll have taken all the damage from minion aggro and maybe a Q if I throw him. Which is why Galio wins that lane, usually. But, back to bot lane. This is really good, if you're ever against a Caitlyn or a Nidalee in bot lane, they'll place their traps, you can put your W on them, walk on it, and you get healed right back up. Because, keep in mind, don't do this if they're nearby and they're going to keep shooting you, that's just dumb. But, if you look at it, 800 range, you can use it, you can put it on anybody. 60 mana, that's actually not a whole lot, considering how strong it is. 13 second cooldown. Now look at this. He gets out at level 1. He can put an extra 30 MR and armor. That's a typo right there. That's supposed to be armor. An extra 30 armor on somebody for 60 mana. That's ridiculous. And at max rank 90, which is it's gonna be the second thing you max. 90 bonus MR and armor. Think about it in the context like this. If you're playing an assassin champion and you jump on an 80 carry and they suddenly become a tank because of the stats they get from Galio, that's going to be really frustrating. And that's why Galio is really good against first enemies, especially because they're not going to be able to assassinate somebody if they have this ability on them. And another thing that's really great for Galio is the heal. Every time somebody hits Galio with his W, he gets healed. So if you let's say the minion wave's coming in, you're at 50% health. Nobody's around to take advantage of that. You walk in front of the minions, you get them to aggro you, you put your W on. It heals you. It doesn't matter how much damage you take so long as you're taking damage. You can take 1 damage and you will be healed like a ton. You'll be healed 25, 40, 55, 70, 85, plus 30% AP, no matter how much damage you have taken, which is incredible. It does cap, you can only heal so much, but that amount increases through level, which up to 425 plus 150% AP per hit is actually pretty impressive. That's a lot of healing. Alright, and now for the ability that could not be in his kit that I wouldn't even notice, I wouldn't care about. His Righteous Gust. Now, Galio basically shoots a draft in front of him that deals magic damage to all enemies. It's a directional draft only. If you throw it backwards to your teammate who's running to lane behind you, they're not going to get the buff. It has to be in the same direction it was casting. Otherwise they won't get the movement speed. It has a very long range. Again, 11,080 range. Compare again to turret range, which is only 775. 775. Now look at this again. The mana cost. It starts at level 1, deals less damage, has less utility than his Q, and it all, from level 1, it has higher mana cost. And this is the reason why people think Galio runs out of mana. They use its ability and they expect it to do much, and it's not doing anything. It's barely damaging them, it's costing a ton of mana, and they're barely getting any movement speed for it. So let's say you use a QE combo at level 1, or level 2, sorry. Level 1 Galio Q is 65 mana. Level 1 Galio E is 70. You're blowing half of your mana pool with one combo because you're trying to use E and expect it to do something. It's not. And this is why I scratch my head every time I see a Galio guide that recommends maxing E second, or worse, first, because it's completely pointless. All maxing it does is increase the mana cost, slightly increase the damage, and slightly increase the movement speed boost. To put this into context, E at level 1 gives less movement speed than basic boots. E at max rank is the only point in time where it gives more movement speed than an upgraded pair of boots, like Merc Fist. It's really not a decent ability. If Galio ever does get reworked, I want to see this ability changed to buffs because it's really underwhelming right now. Especially for a character who's supposed to help his team get into a fight. Alright, next is his iconic ability, Idol of Drown. Galio becomes a statue for 2 seconds, taunting nearby foes and reducing incoming physical and magic damage by 50%. So he takes half damage from all these auto attacks, so it's okay if he taunts an AD carry. And additionally, while channeling, Galio is allowed to cast his Bulwark. So think about how tanky you're getting when you ult. You use your ultimate, 50% damage is being reduced, and at that point you're probably going to have a decently high ranked W. So you're going to get like 60, 70 MR and ability power while stacking on top of that 50% damage reduction. So you can realistically heal when you're very low health from ulting somebody because you put your W on you. And this is why I love Galio. A lot of his abilities work with his W really well, and it's really enjoyable to play. So when the channel ends, Galio bursts out of the statue form, dealing magic damage to enemies within range. Every time Galio takes damage from an auto attack, he gets his ultimate, when it pops, deals 5% extra damage and it caps at 40. If the channel's cancelled early, which it sometimes will be, the damage radius is reduced to 575. And until recently I didn't realize this, and it's confused me how some people didn't take damage, but after knowing this, it's something I really wish I had known because I could have taken advantage of it previously. So Galio's R has a range of 600, mana cost of 100. It's the only ability in his kit that reduces cooldown by leveling it. It has a magic damage, a pretty decent magic damage, nothing crazy. Basically the idea is you're trying to get a lot of people so that 40% gets hit. So it deals punch. And it's also capped at 300, 462, and 616 damage plus 84% AP. Alright, I think that's the last one for this. I'm gonna quickly go through the guide and explain some things. Alright, so this is my preferred start. I like to start with 2 fairy charms, a health potion, a mana potion, a ward, and a warding totem. Sometimes I'll opt for more potions and ignore the stealth ward if I know I'm not going to get ganked. If we're against a jungler who doesn't have a very safe clear, usually I'll go for more potions because I know I can lane longer and I know we're probably not going to get ganked. Galio has a lot of options when you're deciding to build him. One of the most important things that you need to decide at the beginning of the game is between Ancient Coin and Relic Shield. These two are very different, and used correctly can really benefit your team. And when I look at the enemy team composition, I think, is this going to be a passive lane? Do we need help engaging? Do we need help disengaging? If so, Ancient Coin is probably what I'm going to go for, because then it builds into the Talisman of Ascension, and we basically get a giant movement speed boost. If the enemy team is very damage heavy, very bursty, I'm going to go with the Relic Shield, because the face of the mountain gives so much ability to save people. I say so many people, face of the mountain, as well as Mikhail's. And basically my goal, I'll almost always go with that face of the mountain, because I like that it also gives sustain in lane. That's something that makes me very happy, because that's one of the things that Galio has always been insulted for when thought of as a support. Oh, he has no sustain. Well, Relic Shield gives a small form of that. And I've made it so my core items, by the time laning ends, will be Relic Shield, or one of its upgrades. Definitely a Chalice. Chalice is actually what I rush first. If we're getting crazy kills, I'll get a Sight Stone first, but usually I'll go for Chalice first. So basically you want these 3 items by the end of laning phase, or the Ancient Coin if you opt for that. And the reason for this is, you need to get your wards out. You need a Sight Stone as a support. It's so important. Especially in solo queue with chaos is everywhere, you need to be able to see things coming. And you need to be able to predict what's going to happen if you saw somebody somewhere. The Chalice is pretty self-explanatory. Galio needs magic. He needs a little bit of magic resist. It's nice to have. But he also needs the mana regen, which is really important, because even as somebody who plays Galio a lot, sometimes I find it necessary to get that extra little bit of mana regen. And obviously the GP10 items are self-explanatory. For the love of God, if you get a Sight Stone, get rid of the Warding Totem, get a Sweeping Lens. I see this too often. It really bothers me. You have absolutely no use for the Warding Totem. If you use that and you have all the Sight Stones out, it's gonna replace the ward anyways. So you have no reason not to. My mate game goal is I want these 3 items. I want my Face of the Mountain, I want my Mikhail's Crucible, and I want my Sight Stone. And this is because when I play Galio, I play him more of a defensive support once we get to the mid game and the team fights. I play him mostly to feel for my team, to protect my team. If I have to, I'll be the initiator, but usually you want somebody else to be the initiator, because Galio is not a reliable initiator for a fight. It's just, he's simply not. He has no means of getting into a fight to death flash. And usually you want to be protecting your AD carry. Once you get these items, you're pretty much free to get whatever the hell you want, as long as it's situation dependent. For example, if you have a very AP heavy team and you're doing well, why not get an Abyssal Scepter? It's really nice. It's really nice to have. If you need a little split pushing power, Banner of Command can be good. It's actually a very underrated item. It's fairly expensive though, so keep in mind, hopefully you're not going to be getting in too many situations where a different item would be better. I love to get Spirit Visage, because it gives lots of health, it gives lots of magic resist, it gives lots of health movement, and it gives cooldown reduction, as well as a huge increase in heal, which is really good for Galio because his W already heals a crap ton, so why not heal a crap ton more? Never get Hardened Sensor. It's just pointless. Just don't do it. Alright, I'm gonna skip through these. If you want some more clarification on the lane matchups, feel free to comment. I check it almost daily, probably more than 1 time a day. Oh yeah, here's a point. I truly believe support Galio is where Galio is strongest in the meta. I think a lot of other mids outshine him, and I think top and support are where he's strongest right now, because he can be tanky, but he can also be a damage source with the right items. That pretty much wraps up what I wanted to talk about, and if you have any questions, please feel free to comment on comment at the bottom. I literally check it constantly, so I will be there to respond within, and probably by the next day it'll probably be answered. And that's really all I have to say. And thanks for listening. If you made it this far, good job, because I know my voice is really boring. And